They gave the will to my brother. Held a brunch for it, actually. White tablecloths, mimosas. A lawyer in a navy blazer reading from a leather-bound folder, all to announce that Jonathan Ward, the eldest son, would inherit everything. In the house, the land, the company. They called it Robert Ward's final wish. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. But I sat there, 2 chairs away from the lawyer, fingers curled around a chipped coffee mug, listening to my name never be said, not once. No one looked at me directly. Not Mom, not Aunt Diane, not even the cousins who used to braid my hair during summer picnics. It was like I was a shadow in the room, useful for symmetry but never central. But here's what no one at that table knew. At the real will, signed by my father in his handwriting, dated 6 months later than the one they presented. Notarized, witnessed, I hadn't shown it to anyone, not yet. I'd kept it folded inside the back cover of Dandelion Wine, his favorite Ray Bradbury novel, tucked in a locked cedar box I carried with me when I moved out 3 years ago. It wasn't that I wanted revenge, I just wanted time. Time to be sure I wasn't mistaking hurt for righteousness. Time to grieve without lawyers. Time to wait and see if they would remember me, even when the money was involved. They didn't. The meeting took place in our family home in Charlottesville, Virginia, a brick colonial with ivy climbing up one side and a driveway that always cracked near the mailbox. I was born in that house, learned to ride my bike in that driveway. I bandaged Dad's hand in that kitchen the year he accidentally sawed into his thumb rebuilding the porch. That home held ghosts that belonged to me. But on that Sunday morning, it wasn't mine anymore. Not in their eyes. Jonathan was already referring to the master bedroom as his. Mom nodded like that was natural. Like the boy who hadn't called during Dad's final month, had somehow earned that right more than the daughter who cleaned out Dad's feeding tube and read to him when he could no longer form words. I should have spoken up, maybe. But instead, I watched the light hit the edge of my mug and thought, let them bury themselves in their version. I have the original. 3 winters ago, just a month before he passed, Dad called me into his study. It was snowing, a thin, soft kind of snow that felt like an apology for something the sky couldn't fix. He was weak, his hands trembling slightly even as he pressed the envelope into mine. "This is for you," he said, voice low. "If they forget who was here, this will remember for them." I opened it that night, not out of greed, but to be sure. Inside was a revised will, signed and dated, with one key difference. The estate would go to me, all of it. There was a short paragraph in his shaky script. "Claire has been by my side. She understands the business. She understands this home. I trust her with all of it." Never told anyone. For 3 years, I watched as they erased me, little by little. Holiday invites that stopped coming. Board meetings I was excluded from. Whispers about how Jonathan was always the responsible one. I let it happen not because I was weak, but because I was waiting. Waiting to see if they would ever choose me without being forced to. Waiting to see if love, real love, could overcome hierarchy and tradition. But that morning, watching Jonathan raise a glass to toast our father's vision, something inside me went still. Not angry, not sad, just done. I didn't say a word at the table. Didn't object when the lawyer slid the documents across to Jonathan with a nod. I just excused myself, walked out into the cold Virginia air, and drove back to my 1-bedroom apartment off Preston Avenue. And that night, I placed the original will on my kitchen table. I looked at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and searched for an estate attorney in Richmond, one I could trust. Because now, it wasn't about waiting. It was about witnessing. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story I had lived from the front row. I still remember the sound of his breath at night. It came in short, uneven waves, not quite a rattle, not yet silence, just enough to keep me awake, counting the seconds between each inhale like I was listening for the space where he might slip away. No one else stayed in the house after hospice moved in. Jonathan said he had too much going on with the firm. Mom claimed she couldn't bear to watch him fade. Aunt Diane stopped calling altogether. So it was me and the machines. Me and the long plastic tubes and warm washcloths and meals I blended until they turned into something unrecognizable but necessary. Me and the man who used to fix my broken science projects at 2 a.m. and carry me on his shoulders when the fireworks got too loud. Dad couldn't speak much in those last 3 weeks. But he still listened. I know he did because one night, when I sat on the floor beside his bed and whispered, "I don't think they see me, Dad," his hand twitched just enough to brush mine. I didn't need more than that. I'd already stopped expecting recognition years earlier. The truth is, I used to believe being the good daughter would eventually pay off. I wasn't perfect, I made my share of mistakes, but I showed up. I stayed. When the company faced an audit, I helped Dad sort through 8 years of invoices. When the roof caved in after the 2018 storm, I climbed up there with him and held the flashlight while he hammered in cold November wind. Jonathan showed up for photo ops and quarterly dinners. But Dad never stopped hoping we'd all hold it together. He wanted peace. He wanted legacy. He wanted blood to mean something more than legal obligation. And I think that's why he gave me the will. Not to punish Jonathan, not to create drama, but because he saw who did the real work and who didn't. After his death, I moved out the same week, packed everything I owned into 2 borrowed suitcases, and left without waiting for someone to say goodbye. Mom didn't ask where I was going. She just gave me a tight nod like she was checking something off a list. Claire, handled. I rented a small apartment in a converted duplex near the UVA campus. Peeling paint, thin walls, streetlight glare bleeding through the blinds. But it was mine, and it was quiet. I spent my evenings freelancing, editing essays, tutoring high schoolers online, helping 2 single moms file tax returns, for free, nothing glamorous, just work that mattered. And I kept the envelope. The real will. Tucked in a book no one would think to open. Always nearby like a quiet pulse under the floorboards. For 3 years, I did nothing with it. Because I didn't want to use my father's death as a weapon. Because I kept hoping someone would call and say, "Hey Claire, we should talk. Maybe we missed something, maybe we missed you." But no one called. Instead, I got an email from a real estate firm last week, said they'd been authorized by the current heir to begin preparing the family home for sale. They wanted to schedule a walkthrough. They asked me to return my keys. I stared at the screen for a long time. They didn't even ask if I wanted to buy it. They just assumed I was gone. A guest. A placeholder. A piece of furniture they could move out with the old carpets. That night, I opened the box. The paper was exactly as I remembered it. Thick, cream-colored, slightly curled at the edges. My father's signature stretched across the bottom like a bridge. I called the Richmond attorney I'd saved in my phone. Ariana McKee, Estate and Probate Law. She answered on the second ring. And when I told her what I had, she didn't hesitate. "Bring it in tomorrow. Don't send scans, originals only. We'll get it verified." I folded the document gently, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and packed it into a fireproof folder. Then I zipped that folder into the lining of my old suitcase, the same one I left home with, the same one no one ever asked me to return. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there with my hand on the zipper and said aloud to no one, "You gave everything to Jonathan. But Dad gave this to me." And that changed everything. By the time I arrived at Ariana McKee's office, the sun hadn't fully cleared the skyline. Her building sat on a quiet stretch of Broad Street, across from an old Baptist church and a diner that still advertised fresh pie in faded red paint. Inside, her office smelled like lavender and old paper, walls lined with certificates, a single framed photo of a dog on her desk. No receptionist, just Ariana, in black boots and a navy blazer, flipping through a yellow legal pad like she was already halfway to war. "Claire," she said without preamble, "you brought it?" I nodded and handed her the document. She laid it flat on the desk, studied the edges, the notary seal, the ink pressure. "No discoloration," she murmured. "No evidence of alteration. 2 signatures, both witnesses appear legitimate. This is solid." "And it's dated 6 months after the version they used," I added. Ariana looked up at me. "They never filed this one?" "No, he gave it to me directly. I think he wanted it quiet, in case things got ugly." "Well," she said, flipping to a clean page, "ugly has arrived." Over the next week, I did everything they never expected me to do. I didn't send angry emails. I didn't confront Jonathan. I didn't even tell my mother. Instead, Ariana filed a formal motion with the Virginia Probate Court to reopen the estate under challenge of conflicting wills. The moment it hit the system, I became something new in their world. Not the quiet one, not the invisible one, but a legal problem. The first call came from Jonathan himself. His voice was calm, falsely warm. "Claire, I heard about the filing. This seems out of nowhere?" "I'm just following protocol," I said. "There's a way we could have handled this internally." "You mean secretly?" A pause. "Why now?" he asked. I didn't answer. Because he wasn't really asking. He was warning. The same way he used to when we were kids and he'd broken something but made me lie for him. Later that evening, I received an email from the family's longtime lawyer, the same one who read the original will at brunch, asking if I was sure I wanted to escalate a personal matter into litigation. I replied with a scanned copy of my father's handwritten note. "Claire understands this home. I trust her with all of it." No further comment. When the probate court issued its preliminary review, the result was clear. My document was not only valid, it was more recent. That alone gave it legal precedence. Jonathan's lawyer filed a flurry of objections, everything from questioning Dad's mental capacity to implying I had coerced him during a vulnerable period. I let Ariana handle every response with surgical calm. Meanwhile, I went back to work. Back to tutoring. Back to grocery store runs and bus stop walks and folding my laundry at 10 p.m. in a laundromat that smelled like burnt fabric softener. And each night, I'd place my fireproof folder back in its drawer and whisper, "I don't need to win loud, I just need to win clean." 2 weeks later, I received another email, this time from Jonathan's assistant. It wasn't legal, it wasn't official. It was a proposal. They wanted to offer me a settlement, a buyout, a carefully worded exchange in which I would step away from inheritance claims in return for a generous cash sum and a letter of gratitude signed by Jonathan himself. I laughed, not a cruel laugh, just the kind that comes from years of being underestimated. They still thought this was about money. I forwarded the email to Ariana. She replied with one line, "Do not respond, let the papers speak." And that's exactly what I did. The final hearing was set for early June, courtroom 12B, Richmond. Wood-paneled walls, worn carpet, a judge with silver eyebrows and the kind of patience that says, "I've seen this show before." Jonathan was there in a gray suit that didn't quite fit right, next to 2 attorneys who kept glancing over at me like I might unravel. But I didn't speak. Ariana did all the talking, calm, sharp, indisputable. She laid out timelines, showed signatures, presented dates. She played a recorded statement from one of the original witnesses to Dad's final will, a hospice nurse who remembered the day clearly and said, "He was lucid. He said, My daughter has carried me. I want her to carry this." At the end, the judge looked at Jonathan's side and said, "Unless there's proof this document was forged and you have provided none, the court recognizes it as the valid final will." Silence. Then the gavel. Just one strike. Like thunder in a locked room. When it ended, Jonathan didn't look at me. He walked out first. And I sat there for one more minute, staring at the courtroom ceiling, breathing in something I hadn't felt in years. Not triumph, so clarity. And clarity is peace. The house was mine. Not in theory, not in hope, not in the soft, invisible way women are sometimes allowed to feel like they belong to something. It was mine, in the record books, on the deed, and in the quiet click of the mailbox key turning in my hand. 3 days after the court ruling, I walked through the front door of the Ward house, for the first time not as someone visiting her past, but as someone reclaiming it. The lights hummed softly, as they always had. The floor still creaked on the third plank near the study. Nothing had changed, and everything had. Mom wasn't home. She'd moved in with a cousin across town weeks earlier, claiming the house felt too full of memory. She left no note. No goodbye, just an empty tea tin in the cabinet and a list of forwarding addresses taped to the fridge. I stood in the foyer for a while, letting the silence unfold around me. No applause. No congratulations. No one there to say you were right all along. But I didn't need any of it. Instead, I walked to the study. The same room where Dad had pressed the envelope into my hand 3 winters ago. The same room where I'd once curled on the floor as a child, while he built bookshelves that tilted slightly to the left but never once fell. I sat at his old desk, opened the top drawer, and placed the will, the real one, gently inside. Then I locked it. Not to hide it, but to honor it. Because the truth had already done its job. It didn't need to shout. It had been enough to exist. A month passed. No one reached out. Not Jonathan, not Mom, not the cousins who had clapped for him at the will brunch. But slowly other people did. The hospice nurse wrote me a letter. "Thank you for fighting with dignity. I wish more families had your kind of stillness." One of my former students dropped off a small plant and a card. "Your tutoring got me into UVA. I didn't forget, I just didn't know where you lived. Until now." And then there was the envelope from the city. Final confirmation of the property transfer, title deed, tax reassessment, utilities re-registration. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal at the bottom, gold, raised, quietly defiant. I didn't frame it. I didn't post it online. I slipped it into a file folder marked simply, "Truth." They tried to reduce me to someone whose absence would keep the peace. But I wasn't the storm. I was the record keeper. The one who stayed. The one who witnessed. The one who carried a folded piece of paper through years of silence and still knew exactly when to unfold it. And because of that, I didn't just inherit a house. I inherited authority over my own history. In early fall, I reopened Dad's scholarship fund, the one that had quietly closed after his death. I funded it myself, restructured the paperwork, and renamed it the Robert Ward Legacy Grant in honor of the ones who stay. The first recipient was a high school senior named Eli, the son of a single mother, caretaker for his grandfather, passionate about engineering. He cried when I handed him the envelope, not from greed, from relief. I understood that too well. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with small, steady shifts, a lock turning, a seal pressing down, a woman standing in a house where she was once invisible and now leaves the lights on just because she can. And when people ask what happened, how I won, I don't mention the court or the signatures or the moment the judge brought the gavel down. I tell them this: then they gave the will to my brother, but my father gave it to me. And that made all the difference. because in the end they never saw the document. But I never forgot the hand that gave it to me. And I never will.